Welcome to Preparing for AI with Matt Cartwright and Jimmy Rhodes, the podcast which investigates the effect of AI on jobs, one industry at a time. We dig deep into barriers to change, the coming backlash, and ideas for solutions and actions that individuals and groups can take. We're making it our mission to help you prepare for the human and social impacts of AI. Welcome back to Preparing for AI, the 378th most popular podcast on artificial intelligence, but the number one podcast on the effect of AI on jobs. I'm Matt Cartwright.
And I'm Jimmy Rhodes.
And today we are going to look at the hospitality industry. So maybe one that doesn't seem an obvious fit with AI, but this is maybe a really good example of where the line between AI and technology becomes blurred. And me and Jimmy were talking as we kind of prepared this episode about things like app-based ordering, which is clearly just an advance in technology. It's, in its most basic form. But AI is increasingly being used in the food service industry to enhance customer experiences, including making food, drink recommendations, cocktails, etc. And restaurants are employing AI-driven apps and recommendation engines to suggest meals based on customer preferences, for example. And we've got things like AI-driven kiosks in restaurants, which aim to reduce wait times and apparently improve the ordering experience by offering personalised meal suggestions. So, Jimmy, are there any specific developments which you think are particularly relevant to hospitality, or anything sort of more general that you wanted to bring us up to speed with?
So, I think we talked about robots a few weeks ago. I think McDonald's have been testing out a robot burger flipper, which is something they're already working on. But I think going back to what you were talking about a minute ago, so I think the advances in large language models and some of the things we talked about in previous episodes, more generally, there's no recent advances that specifically will impact the hospitality sector. But more generally, we're moving towards that world where instead of just ordering your food through an app at a table or ordering it through an app at McDonald's or something like that, you might get specific recommendations. You might get recommendations that are tailored to your needs because AIs have a better understanding of the world now.
And is that, do you think there's we're maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but do you think that's displacing people at the moment, or do you think it's, just making a kind of positive? Because I think for most people, and we had a conversation actually about algorithms driving people down the route that they don't try new and different things because it just keeps suggesting that they, try things that fit in with what they like. But I do think most people would say that, being able to have more personalized recommendations is a good thing in many ways. Is this a kind of positive story at the moment that we're seeing, or is there, the kind of dark impact on jobs or is there a negative in there, do you think?
I don't think so. We'll get into jobs later on, but I actually think out of all the episodes we've done so far, the hospitality industry is one where I don't think jobs will be impacted as much. I think a lot of the things we've talked about already are supplementary to the industry. So, better recommendations and things like that. I think the reason I say that I don't think that jobs will be impacted as much is because it feels like the hospitality industry, that's the whole point, right? The point is that you want that hospitality and you want that to be a person-to-person experience.
So there you go. You heard it here first. No threat to jobs. Thanks for listening to the episode, and do follow and subscribe and come back next week. I've got some examples. This is still on a positive note, I guess, but I've got some examples of AI tools. So I found a site called Hotel Tech Report. And I think the best thing to do, actually, I'm just going to read through these examples because we want to try and give, especially for people in that industry, to give them, specifics. And we sort of criticized ourselves a little bit, I think, in the first few episodes about how we said, go away and try large language models without giving specific information. But I didn't realize how many of these tools there are. And, these are kind of specific to hotels, which kind of seems to be somewhere where there's a lot of activity. So I'll just go through these platforms. So hotel operations, something called Alice Housekeeping by Actable, spelled Actabl, which leverages artificial intelligence to automate and optimize room assignments. DUVE Communication Hub uses AI and machine learning to detect and track guests' feelings and emotions by analysing words, phrases and emojis used during messages throughout the guest journey. That sounds kind of equally interesting and incredibly foreboding. Game Changer by Duetto. Pricing algorithms leverage AI to help hotels determine the right price for their rooms and maximize yield. Ideas Revenue Solutions, which leverages AI to help hotels forecast accurately, price confidently, and achieve greater profitability. Then in marketing, Allura.ai, which creates personalized booking experiences for every guest throughout the online journey, driving brand engagement, guest acquisition. SiteMinder Demand Plus drives more direct bookings using AI to manage your listings. Revenate Marketing uses AI to synthesize and dedupe guest profiles within the hotel CRM project. And then there are more, examples in hotel sales and mice, guest experience. There's some stuff in here around human resources. So Hotel Effectiveness Perfect Lab by Actable leverages machine learning and AI to help hotel operations professionally maximize and optimize staff in their properties to reduce OPEX and grow NOI, whatever that means. So I think I'll stop there. I mean, that's quite a few, but I wanted to read them out because I thought it was just interesting. If anyone works in the hotel industry and they're thinking, what can I do? That there seem to be on this hotel tech report, just as one source, tons of specific platforms that are cropping up for this industry.
And actually, just to clarify a point, we're talking about hospitality this week. Obviously, a few episodes ago now, 2 or 3 episodes ago, we talked about office work. I think if we're talking about, if you go back to that episode, in the hospitality industry, the kind of back office work is going to be affected. And you probably need to refer back to that episode in terms of like any kind of administrative roles or that kind of thing. They're clearly going to be affected. But I guess I was focusing more on the front office, person to person kind of hospitality, like what you traditionally think of as hospitality roles.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to this for the first time, I mean, do go back to the previous episodes. But I think that's right. The office work episode was kind of applies across almost every industry because it's anything that's kind of administrative, executive tasks, and equally the kind of robotics episode. I know we're going to talk some robotic stuff on this, but another episode that kind of covers multiple industries. There are some other examples which I guess are more obvious ones that we're seeing now. So cleaning, reception, AI robot concierge. So there's a particular one Hilton have called Connie, which is powered by IBM's Watson, which is IBM's Watson is a large language model. It was, I think it became best known because it won a game of Jeopardy against a group of kind of champions. Seems to be less well known now, but it was one of the big ones before. And I think like most IBM things, they may be going more for the kind of corporate market. Chatbots obviously for guest services. So I think you can think there are hotels that exist at the moment, even some of the kind of budget chains that have elements of it. But I'm thinking of the kind of pod hotels and the kind of, express or light where you don't have a check-in. You can see how that's currently technology, but how AI could be used to kind of streamline and improve that process and kind of personalize it. The cleaning one is quite interesting. Where my daughter goes to nursery is it's not hospitality, but it's a big office building, and there are robot cleaners for the last year and a half. Previous to that, there were cleaners that were cleaning the big kind of open lobby atrium area. Now there are 2 robots in there. So, that I guess you can see, even if it's not people's rooms initially, you can certainly imagine in hotels and restaurants that your communal areas will be cleaned by robots.
Definitely. I think if the robots are good enough and hotels can make that cost saving, then they probably will. I guess.
Well, eventually they will clean the rooms, I'm sure.
I'm sure they will.
It just maybe not yet.
Yeah. I mean, not to keep referring back to previous episodes, but I guess as per that robotics episode, that area is moving really fast and things have actually even moved on a little bit even since we did that episode a few weeks ago. But I can definitely see that being a more medium to long-term threat to jobs in this kind of industry.
And I think another area where there's probably a sort of really big positive there is this is thinking more of kind of hotels, but it would also work for restaurants and bars and stuff in tourist hotspots, and actually other areas. thinking more broadly of hospitality, we could say kind of POIs, places of interest, and big kind of tourist attractions that helping with the language barrier. So automated translation tools that, mean that you don't have to have people who speak 10 different languages. You can still have people, but you can complement them. I don't want to be talking about the augmentation, because I think the augmentation argument is often used as an excuse for the stealth, cutting of jobs. But this is, I think, an example of augmenting people with sort of translation software initially. Automated kitchens, elements of it anyway, in line with what you said with the kind of McDonald's example. So probably this is kind of fast food more than it is more kind of refined cuisine, and robotic couriers that maybe not delivering food to people. We've both been to a restaurant in Beijing in China, which is a hot pot restaurant. For those of you that don't know, hot pot is a kind of big kind of vat in the middle of the table, and you kind of put your own food in and then you dip it in a sauce and eat it afterwards. They have a sort of specially themed AI version of this chain, Haidilao. They have Haidilao has a restaurant in London actually, but not an AI version. But there are still people delivering the food, but they come to the table and there's actually a robot that comes to the table with the food on, and they take the food off and deliver it to you and put it in if you want. And you can also look at how they have robots that are picking. So you choose your kind of ingredients from, let's say, 50 different things. You can choose meat, vegetables, etc. And the robots in the kitchen are picking them off the racks. I think the food is still prepared by people, but you've got robots picking the stuff up that you can go and look at. You've got then robots delivering, and then people accompanying the robot and delivering the food to the table. So, it's kind of already happening. A bit of a gimmicky thing at the moment, and I wonder if it kind of stays like that actually. But you can see some of the uses, particularly that kind of restaurant where you can pick those ingredients. You don't expect to have someone necessarily, a robot cooking them yet, but those robotic arms to pick it, it's quite easy for that kind of thing to be implemented.
I think my view on that, like, if anything, that side of it is gimmicky, and I think it will always be a gimmick. This is just my opinion now. I think it will always be a gimmick because...
We should say this restaurant, it is designed to be a gimmick.
Of course. But my point, what I'm trying to say is that I think that will always remain a gimmick because, again, like the front of the restaurant where you're eating, that's where you want the person-to-person interaction. You want someone to come to your table. You want to interact with people. And I think in a world where there's robots everywhere in the future, if that's what we're talking about, I think you're actually more likely to have robots in the kitchen cooking because you can't see who's cooking your food. So not necessarily positive to all you chefs out there. And I think this is a way off. I think it's a way off. But as I mentioned earlier on, you've already got that example of the McDonald's are testing a robot that can flip burgers. Fairly straightforward task for a robot. And I'm sure they'll be rolling that out in the not too distant future. I can actually see that kind of back office space in the kind of hospitality industry. Obviously, in high-end restaurants, you're still going to potentially expect a chef to be actually in the kitchen doing the work, and there's a flair around that and all the rest of it. But there's probably a lot of restaurants where you're not that bothered.
So it's a bit like other industries where we've said at the top you're safe.
At
the very top, it's not going to replace the big, the most famous celebrity chefs. It's not going to replace a chef in a Michelin-starred restaurant. But we said fast food, but also kind of those middle sort of family restaurants. Does anyone actually care who's cooking the food?
No, I think in Pizza Hut, McDonald's, any of those kind of places.
Anywhere you don't have an open kitchen, basically, it's already been decided that we don't care. If we care, there's an open kitchen. I kind of think that's almost the way to look at it.
Exactly. I don't. Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't bother me whether my Pizza Hut was prepared by a robot, but I can imagine that most people would still want to interact with waiting staff and actually have that human-to-human interaction, at your table.
I'm going to challenge you on that, and the reason I'm going to challenge you, and I appreciate not everyone's in the same space, so I'm, for various reasons, sort of more cautious of COVID than a lot of people are. But if you think about when a lot of the sort of tools that we talked about for remote ordering and stuff came in, they came in because of the pandemic, right? They came in to keep people from having to, interact when they were trying to stay safe. Now, if you remove sort of service people, you remove the risk of infection. And, think what you want about COVID, there may be another pandemic. Looks like bird flu is now infecting cattle. Who knows what's going to come about as a result of that? We've got measles outbreaks, flu. I wonder whether, if things head in the direction that I think that they will, and there is, at some point a backlash in kind of health, well, actually, there's a positive story here in terms of, robots delivering food takes away the risk of interacting with a stranger who could be passing something on. So there's a kind of hygiene thing. I mean, even in the kitchen, there is a hygiene thing that if it's a robot, presumably it's easier to make the preparation of food very hygienic because you don't have the human element of people, breathing in and potentially, you're not going to get hairs in your food, right? Because there's a robot preparing the food.
Yeah. And I mean, some of our viewers, listeners,
Readers.
maybe from the...
I think they're called readers, apparently. If you listen to Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, they say that Rory Stewart said that podcast listeners are called readers.
You've given away your political leanings there, but fair enough. So our readers in the US, I suppose a little benefit for them is no more tipping. If we've got any. A side benefit for them is no more tipping too.
Yeah. Well, that's a massive benefit. So if you're in the US, we've just reduced your bill by 20%. And presumably the price of the food is going down anyway because of the preparation cost. So for the consumer, maybe robots in restaurants is a real cost saving. Potentially,
although I think the reason they have such a tipping culture in the US is because they don't pay the staff. So I'm not sure a robot would actually be cheaper.
I worked in restaurants in the US and my salary was $1 and everything was tips. So you're right. So they'll actually have to pay any of the people that work there an actual wage.
Well, yeah. So maybe thinking this through, your jobs are probably safe if you're in the US because you rely on tips.
So let's look at where it's affecting jobs, or is it affecting jobs? I think we sort of said at the beginning that we don't think it massively is. So maybe this is a short section, but I think there are examples. I think it's another example of an industry where it's not going to be a big, obvious impact because it leads to, a reduction of roles when big fast food chains put in automated ordering counters, or when a hotel replaces a night concierge with a robot counter. But that doesn't, that doesn't go across the board, and it's not all roles. And some of those things we've seen. So if we talk about the kind of ordering counters, they already exist, right? If you go to, for example, a McDonald's or KFC in an airport, for example, there is nobody serving you. There are people getting the food out afterwards, but everyone's ordering at a desk. So, that's kind of already happening. But there are examples out there. It's I feel like a broken record, but it's the kind of, maybe it's not even a stealth thing, but it's that drip, drip, drip. It's not a big, we don't foresee, I don't think, a big kind of, everyone's going to cut all their waiting staff in the short term anyway.
I don't think so. I think the things to keep an eye on here. So I think this is an industry where less jobs have been impacted already. I think if you work in the back office, then potentially those jobs might be a little bit impacted a little bit sooner. If you're front of house, then I think that there's always going to be a demand for that, like human to human interaction, like I say, like that kind of personal experience, which I think will pervade into the future. But what I would keep an eye on is the story around robotics, and I think that's moving very, very, very quickly right now. I'm sure we'll do future episodes on it. So that's the kind of thing I would listen out for, because if you work as cleaning staff, if you work as back office staff in a restaurant, for example, then I think those are the kinds of the jobs that'll be next. And it's probably medium term. It might be like 2 to 3 years away, but I would keep an eye on that robotics space.
It's a rite of passage for kind of, youngsters who would work in supermarkets. And, well, I say youngsters, I certainly did work in supermarkets and bars and restaurants. Those jobs maybe won't exist. They were kind of really junior jobs. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe, young people don't have to rely on part-time jobs. They can get their universal basic income when they turn 15.
Yeah, although that's a bit sad in a way, because
they'll be coders. They'll be fine, because they'll be the ones who are actually able to do jobs. It's the people our age that need to worry.
I don't think we've done an episode on coders yet. They're going this year.
Yeah. And we should say me and Jimmy, we're in our early 20s. So
yeah, we were 20 years ago anyway. But no, I mean, I would keep an eye on those spaces. I think that, I think there's, what I was going to say before is I think there's something a little bit sad about that for me if there won't be any more kind of bar work and working in clubs, because I really enjoyed those jobs actually. I mean, I don't think I enjoyed them at the time, but like my nostalgia for them is,
I enjoyed them at the time.
Yeah, maybe I did enjoy them at the time. But yeah, I like that was kind of a rite of passage, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing that we'll see as an effect for sure is that businesses that don't adopt these efficiencies, and again, this is not every sector. We're probably looking at hotels, fast food initially, but if they don't adopt the AI efficiencies that we know others are making, it's going to be difficult for them to compete on price. So, like we said, at the top of the market, you're paying for that personalized service. Lower down, if you don't adopt them, okay, maybe the lower wages of hospitality mean there's sort of less of a pressure to cut roles from a financial point of view, but you also have really, really low margins in a lot of these areas. So, you're not going to be able to compete. And I think sadly that means potentially what we might see is, kind of acquisitions and mergers and the big players kind of, absorbing more of the market because they're able to make these efficiencies. So maybe the jobs are still there, but it's maybe much more difficult for you to start up a little, fast food business. Although I guess, if AI is cheap enough, you can adopt it. So if we think the price is going to come down, maybe that's not too much of an issue. And robots will surely eventually be able to perform the housekeeper role, and some, if not all, of the reception roles. So, you might have a person on reception that's kind of, there as the kind of figure, but actually most people are going up to the counter that's automated. You check out of a hotel now, and how often do you actually go and check out? You usually just dump your key unless you need to request a service. So I kind of think for most people that's not really something that they would worry about. You'll maybe not notice it until it's gone, and then you'll long for the days of, the concierge with the big tash and the big long coat. That I like those guys anyway. I think it was always a man in his kind of late 50s, early 60s that looked very proud of that job. And the concierge role for me is this kind of, I don't know, there's something almost romantic about the idea. I think that will be one of the roles that goes first, but I think it's one of the roles that I would kind of like to see go last.
But why do you? Because
I'm an old romantic, Jimmy, and I'm also a doomer that doesn't want things to change. I want to go back to how it was in 1995.
Oh no, my meaning is, why do you think that's one of the jobs that will go first? Because if anything, I feel like the opposite. I feel like why do you have that? Why do you have a concierge now? Like the hotels that have them have a concierge, not because they need to.
Because an LLM is able to provide, reams of information, personalized. I compare it to like, the London taxi driver that learned the knowledge, mm-hmm. right? And then GPS came in, and I think they still do learn the knowledge.
Yeah.
But the GPS came in, and the GPS will not only know the routes, but it will be able to look at what route is the best at that time according to traffic and exact conditions. So, the automated concierge at some point becomes better than the person.
But I don't think that's why you have a concierge. You have a concierge because it makes you feel special.
I think me and you have flipped roles.
I think we have. But I this is where, and we were going to talk about the backlash every week. And I think this is one of those areas where, if anything, my feeling is the backlash will be actually people don't want robot hotels and robot run hotels and lifeless, soulless venues, bars, restaurants, things like that. I think that, and that, I think that will happen quite quickly. I think people will, a robot hotel or a robot restaurant will be a bit of a novelty for a while, but that's all it'll be. Like
the example we gave of the restaurant, where it's a novelty, but I don't see that restaurant as being a better experience But I remember my dad going and being like, "Oh wow, this is so cool." For him, he didn't even know when we went there what it was going to be, but he was thinking, "This is so cool." But I'm not sure that he necessarily wants to go back there. He just thought it was cool to go there once.
Exactly. But that's it. That's exactly it. But this is so cool is exactly it. This is so cool is this is something interesting I haven't seen before. Is it actually enough to keep you coming back? And I don't think it is. I mean, the reason you go to, one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants or something like that is because he's a famous chef. And all right, maybe you don't have that at Pizza Hut, etc. But I genuinely feel like robots in restaurants will just be a novelty.
I've got some notes here that I made on the kind of backlash issue, and we haven't talked about this section before the podcast, so we haven't kind of compared notes on this. But I put down that I think we will need public customer pushback here. One of the things with this industry is, it's poorly unionized. It doesn't have, the workers in hospitality, unfortunately, don't have a lot of power. Unless they really get it together, and but even if they do, if we think that those roles are easily replaceable, which unfortunately a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are, it's kind of difficult to unionize. So I think this is somewhere where if there is a backlash, it's not going to be about, the workers protested and then they backed down for two reasons. One is that the big players in the industry, they, particularly in like the hotel industry, they can easily do this without much pushback. But also because actually all of those small players, and particularly if you take like restaurants and bars, there are so many kind of small independent bars. Well, they're not going to be able to respond to that. You can't unionize really in those areas. So I think it is going to be a case of the pushback from the public and people wanting that experience. And although I've kind of disagreed with you in some ways, I think you're right in that as we see more and more robots and AI tools in other parts of life, that what we're going to seek out is those, the areas where we don't want to have them. And that will be sport, and it will probably be elements of hospitality. And there'll be areas where there is more of a pushback from people because, like you say, you don't get the same experience without people. So take away my argument about kind of, cleanliness and viruses, blah, 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 and how there's an advantage there. I still buy the fact that, I go into a restaurant now and I've been using, scan at a table and pay for years. But if there's a physical menu, I will always use a physical menu because it's better to use, to be honest. It's just nicer to look at. And I would like the person to come over because then I can call them and say, hey, how long is this going to be? And have a kind of interaction. And there's something nice there, maybe because I worked in those jobs. But I do think you're right that for a lot of people, certainly of the generations that are, consumers today, they'll always, or for a long, long time anyway, there'll be not a need, but a want for that interaction.
I had a good example of this that I thought of earlier in the week, which I think I mentioned, which is now in the UK, and for quite a long time, actually, like before, so I think 10 years ago, you could get a Costa coffee from a machine in a garage. It can make you a coffee. And I don't know about the quality of it and all that kind of stuff, but I think I would guess that you can get a machine now to make a coffee roughly on par in terms of quality with a barista in a Costa coffee shop. So why...
This is a man who not only makes his own coffee, but this is a man who roasts his own beans from scratch. So this is a man who knows his coffee.
True. But it's a good example, right? Because so why, when you go to a Costa coffee in the high street, an actual Costa coffee store, are there baristas in the Costa coffee store, like right now? Because presumably, I mean, even if that machine can't make coffee to the same quality as one of those baristas, and no offense to any of you baristas out there, but it's probably possible to do that. It seems like it's something that's within the realms of possibility. The same with pouring pints, things like that. I think
there's a bit of theatre to it. I think with coffee and cocktails, for example, there's a bit of theatre about how you do it. And coming back to the kind of gimmicky example, I can definitely see, a restaurant where you've got a robot making cocktails and it's a really cool, fun thing for a while. And then it's not as interesting because, one of the things going into a bar and having someone who knows their stuff and that it's this kind of skill and you're getting them to create something for you. Yeah, okay, the robot can create it for you. Maybe they can create it better to your taste, but it's a different kind of theatre.
What about if it's figure 01 or 02 or 03 and it can actually discuss your likes with you and have a conversation with you and, ask you how your day's been? So then it's a like for like replacement at that point, right? So I think the gimmick thing is, so initially that's kind of a gimmick, but there's the gimmick thing of, oh wow, look how this robot can do it. But if you have a choice between the two things, the robot that you can have the conversation with and the person that you can have a conversation with, you're going to have the conversation with a robot for a while. But I still think there's a social element for people. I actually think this is also generational, and we've said this quite a lot, but people who are growing up now and will grow up with this, maybe it's less of an issue. I don't foresee our parents, for example, wanting to do that. I can't see a local British pub where the landlord is a robot. Maybe there won't be any local British pubs left, but it feels wrong. Like it feels wrong. It just feels like it's not. I don't know. I don't think that's what people want. But in the end, that will win out, right? I think that will. Like, hospitality is still commercial. If people want it, then they'll get it if they're willing to pay for it. Yeah, I of course, no one's going to have any money because we've already said they're all going to lose their jobs. So maybe there'll be no hospitality. Well, everyone will be on universal basic income, so there'll probably be a lot more hospitality. Everyone will have a lot more free time. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I hope we don't end up in that world because that sounds quite sad. But then 20, 30 years ago, the idea that we'd all just sit staring at rectangles all day and not interact with each other probably sounded quite sad. I know when I was a kid, I was really into video games, for example, and in the 80s, 90s, giving away my age now, but in the early 90s, there was a handful of kids who were playing computer games and you were kind of on the fringes, you were pretty nerdy. Whereas now, I'm pretty sure that's what all kids do all the time. So, I don't know. Maybe that is the future where everything's done by robots and we're just interacting with machines. So on to the last section, which is what people can do. And I think we're talking here about people who, work in or are associated with the hospitality industry. So is this where the soft skills need to be really worked up? I think it depends on the area. It feels like we said, the impact certainly initially is going to be far more in fast food, budget chains, etc. It doesn't feel like your local neighborhood bar or your pub is going to be improved by robot staff, but maybe the ability to recommend a meal for you or to tailor a cocktail, or personalize the experience, maybe it will win out. I mean, people really, like we've said, they need to vote with their wallets to help the sector. I think, we kind of try and give advice to people within the industry about the things they can learn, but I think there's also here, if you're somebody who cares about having a hospitality industry, then don't go to the restaurant we told you about that's got robots working in it. Put your money into independent businesses that still have people there. That's a really big way to make an interest. That if you care, then that's going to reflect, the market will see that and there'll still be jobs there, I think. I mean, do people feel there's a net gain to hospitality experience by having people there? Does it take away from the social experience not having people? I think it does, but actually, is it the people that you're there with in a bar, or is it the people working in the bar? What do you actually care who's serving you? I think I definitely do like the interaction you have in these, and this might maybe it's just me. I definitely do in bars. I definitely do in a bar, when
landlord or, the manager or the someone in the bar, and you go and have a chat. I mean, the idea of the kind of neighborhood bars on TV like Cheers, and the cafe on Friends, and the pub in EastEnders, and all these things. You think about it, the character that kind of works in that bar, right? That almost the brand is quite often the landlord or the head or the barman or whatever. That's part of the, it's part of the kind of brand of that bar. And I guess with restaurants as well, the maitre d'. I remember an Italian restaurant in Barbican that I used to go to, where the guy who worked there, he'd been working there for sort of 40 years. He looked exactly the same every day. He was moody, he was grumpy, but he was such a character that kind of created the brand of that restaurant.
Yeah, and recently I was back in Sheffield. Haven't been there for quite a while. And the place that I gravitated to was the Broadfield, which used to be our local. And it's for exactly that reason. Like the same people weren't working there, but it's that atmosphere, and that atmosphere is created by the place, the people in there, the like patrons, as well as the staff. So I think it is a interpersonal experience where what you get out of it is that interaction, that person to person interaction. I've mentioned it throughout this episode. I feel like this, moving on, I feel like this episode has been fairly speculative, but that's kind of to be expected, because a lot of the things we're talking about in this episode, we haven't seen the impact on the industry yet. I think we've seen some augmentation, like the things that we've talked about, such as, maybe not AI, but being able to order through machines and being able to have certain interactions through machines and more automatic paying and telling. I think that in terms of what people can do to prepare, I think the first thing is, continue listening to the podcast, because things like robotics, things like AI and large language models, it's a really, really fast moving space. And I think there will be developments over the next year or so that you probably want to keep an eye on, because it's the kind of thing that, whilst this episode's been a bit more speculative, there may well be things that we've not even thought of coming up in the future, which may impact your job if you're in this hospitality sector. I think the other thing you can do is have a think about how to, again, like we've talked about it before, but have a think about how you can use some of these tools and how you can apply them, and how, if you're going into this industry, how would you do it using some of the latest technology?
Ultimately, maybe what, staff in some areas can do is encourage people to support them. So we talked about people voting with their wallets, but, encourage people to come and continue to support small businesses and, local restaurants, bars, pubs, small hotels, bespoke operations. And of course, if you work in this area, try out tools, not just LLMs, but we talked about specific tools just from one article. So, if you are working in hotel sales, you'll be working with mainly AI. If you're in a job, your job will be pretty much run by AI. So, you definitely need to understand the tools that are out there and keep yourself ahead. But if you're a chef, it can help you with menu writing. It can help you with wine matching. It can help you to, create a bespoke menu for someone who comes in and says, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. You can run back and, okay, you can look up a dish on the internet, but you'll be able to go to an LLM and say, you can do it now. You can say, I have a customer, you are writing a menu, this customer cannot eat this, cannot eat this, cannot eat this, I've got this, create a dish that has a Ethiopian theme, and it can give you a dish that has an Ethiopian theme and fits all those things. It can tell you a dish that has a certain number of calories. So I think it will be really powerful as a tool for people in those positions. It maybe won't cook the food in place of you for some time at least, but it will really help you. And maybe you don't need a pot wash anymore, which, a lot of people struggle to fill those positions, but you still need a commis chef. You still need someone to do the more difficult work. So I think that there are examples here that people need to research, but ways in which it can make your job easier and also can improve your ability. Like I say, the chef example, I think, is a great example. if you've got a bar, you can make a menu that fits with certain needs. You can get a gluten-free cocktail. You can get something for someone with whatever allergy, and you can bang, bang, bang. You can get all that information in kind of seconds. So there's some good stuff in there for people in hospitality. I think it's, although it's a speculative episode, I think it's a reasonably positive story. Even I feel slightly positive today.
Yeah, 100%. And some of the stuff you mentioned there, like the creative side of the large language models, I've already experimented with that a little bit myself. If you've got a few ingredients that you need to throw together, then definitely worth chucking into an LLM.
So I just as a last note, I have been studying a Vanderbilt University prompt engineering course, and the first week, the first introductory exercise before you start the course is around a keto menu for Ethiopian, Azerbaijani, is it Azerbaijani or Uzbekistani? Ethiopian, Uzbekistani fusion food, and it uses a large language model to create a menu for a week. So, that's the kind of example that I'm thinking of, where if you're a chef, of course you could do that previously, but it would have taken you a lot of work. It's now something that you can do in minutes, if not seconds. And that's got to be a positive thing. So maybe we leave it there on a positive note. Okay. So that's a wrap for today. As usual, for our new format for the episodes, we will leave you with a song that was written by us and AI together, themed around hospitality and AI. So hope you enjoy that. As always, share with your friends, especially if they work in hospitality. Follow the show, subscribe, comment, get people involved, help us to grow the podcast. And thank you for listening. Have a great week, and we'll see you or hear from you, or you'll hear from us rather, next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Step into a world of luxury and style, where comfort is our top priority. Our AI concierge is always on hand to make your stay a memorable dream. From personalized greetings to smart room controls, our AI technology knows your every need. But don't worry, our friendly staff are here to provide the human touch you still crave. Welcome to the AI Hotel, where technology meets hospitality. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the soothing melodies. We've got the perfect blend of AI and human touch in